everyone, I'm here with just a fun video where I am going to be doing the heavy metal hard rock major arcana. So what I'm doing is I am associating a band or an artist with every single one of the major arcana. So these are just my opinions, and I'm just doing this as a fun video of like what I would choose for these different cards. Now your choices may be different, and that's fine. I also want to say before I get started, there's a lot of people who debate like, is this heavy metal, is that not heavy metal? We're just covering, like, this is very broad, hard rock, heavy metal. Okay, so don't come at me with like so and so isn't heavy metal. I know different people have different opinions about things. This is very general, and this is just meant to be like a fun video. So I was thinking, if I ever made like a tarot deck, who would I put as what for the different major arcana? Now I do have here, let's see if I can grab the deck here. Should have pulled it out before. But this is the classic rock tarot cards. Love this deck. This deck is so much fun. As you can see, the box is a bit mangled. I don't usually use this to read with, but it is like a fun deck. There's a guitar on the back. We've got Axel as the Fool. Love it. How could I not buy this deck? It's got Axel in it as the Fool. Pretty awesome, right? And then, it's got various different like people from classic rock. There's Def Leppard there. Oh, I pulled Slash. Awesome. It's really fun and really good. And it sort of got me thinking about like, well, what would I choose? What would I do? So I'm just going to be going through the major arcana of what bands I think are what major arcana, and you can let me know what your thoughts are. And if you want to do one similar to this, it doesn't have to be heavy metal. It could be, what country stars you think are, or what pop stars. So let's get started. So we're going to start with the Fool. So we got the Fool here. If I had to pick a band to put as the Fool, I would put Black Sabbath. And the reason for that is because the Fool is the beginning, and Black Sabbath is what started it all with heavy metal. The Black Sabbath debut album was released on February 13th of 1970, and that was what kicked off the whole like heavy metal thing. Now, heavy metal it was not a word until a little bit later in the 70s, and at first it was kind of like an insult, and Black Sabbath is like, we're not heavy metal, but historically speaking, they are like the first heavy metal band. And so I have to put them as the Fool. They're at the beginning of all of this. They've started it all like, 50 some years ago. And so I really just have to put Black Sabbath as the Fool for the heavy metal major arcana. Magician. So for the Magician, I would pick Dio. Ronnie James Dio is a legendary figure in heavy metal. He's been in Black Sabbath as well, Rainbow, and of course he's had his own career as well. And if you've ever seen a video from Dio, it's very much about like, he's all about dragons and magic and all sorts of like sort of mystical type themes. He's definitely the magician. There's like videos where he's like got a crystal ball with him. They're very magical, very over the top, very pagan, and so I have to put a Ronnie James Dio's magician. And also he's got an amazing voice. Like he is magic. He's this little tiny guy that can just sing and belt out a tune, and I think I just have to put him as a magician, just with the themes that he has in his music. Plus, he's a really big figure in heavy metal, for the power of his voice and just the themes that he had as well. So have to put Ronnie James Dio as the magician. For the High Priestess, now I gave this some thought because there's not a lot of women historically in heavy metal. It's getting better. There's a lot more women now in heavy metal, and there's always been women in heavy metal, but it is a predominantly male genre, like, let's face it. But I have to give it to Doro and to Warlock. If you don't know who Warlock is, they are a German heavy metal band from the early 80s, and Doro's still singing now, and they're led by a woman named Doro Pesch. If you haven't heard of her, look her up. She is amazing. She's like 60 years old. She looks freaking amazing. She also opens up the Wacken Festival, which is a festival in Germany, the largest metal festival every year. She's kind of like the queen of Wacken, and she's an amazing person as well. Warlock again had some themes of like magic, and it's got Warlock is the name. And then you have like a song called Burning Witches, you know. They're very much, they have those themes as well, those magical kind of themes. And also just because, you know, she was kind of like an early pioneer of women in metal, and she's an amazing person. And I just thought she would be great as the high priestess here, representing the ladies, us ladies in the scene of heavy metal. So the Empress now, I could have picked a woman, but I didn't. For the Empress, I actually picked the band Poison. And the reason I picked that, and really all of hair metal, if you think of bands like Poison and Rat and, you know, all these sort of like hair metal bands, they wore makeup, they dressed very feminine, they had like the big poofy long hair. And so it really was an embracing of the feminine as kind of this rebelliousness against like these hyper masculine and like ideas of what it meant to be a man. And if you think of like bands like Poison and Cinderella and things like that, they very much appealed a lot to a female audience. So embracing that femininity. They also were generally bands that really had very positive sort of like very pro-sex, we'll say, very pro like positive sexual kind of vibes to them. And so it's really about embracing the feminine. And so I thought that, you know, even though you know, the Empress is a woman on here, I think that, you know, the bands that celebrate sort of the feminine and were popular with women would be appropriate for the Empress. Now for the Emperor, I picked Motorhead and Lemmy. So Lemmy is a legendary figure in heavy metal, the band Motorhead. He started off actually as a roadie for Jimi Hendrix, and then he was in Hawkwind, and then he started Motorhead. And Motorhead's like a legendary band that really appeals to punk rockers and to metal musicians. It's like metalheads. It really crossed some of those boundaries. And, you know, if you think of Lemmy, he is like, you know, he's not feminine. He's definitely a typical masculine guy, although he is a feminist. He is very supportive of female artists and was always like very supportive of women. But, you know, he's very down to earth. He tells it like it is. He's very straightforward. But he's really, you know, like he's like very like a masculine type guy. And some people have called him the godfather of heavy metal. And he's been around forever and really embodies the spirit of heavy metal. And so I thought I would put Lemmy from Motorhead as the Emperor, and Motorhead in general. All right, next we have the Hierophant. And so the Hierophant, because the Hierophant's about tradition, I decided that Led Zeppelin would be who I picked for the Hierophant. So, you know, you think Led Zeppelin, it goes, you know, back to the 70s. A lot of people have drawn inspiration from them. Again, this is a band that's considered one of the original heavy metal bands, even though they themselves did not own that particular label, because again, when it started, it was kind of started as an insult, right? But if you think of like Led Zeppelin, so many people have drawn inspiration from them. It's tradition now, you know, it's become traditional sort of heavy metal. And then if you listen to Led Zeppelin, they draw a lot of their lyrics and stuff from things like Celtic and, you know, Norse mythology, from Tolkien. There's a lot of drawing from the past from them. They a lot of imagery, a lot of subject matter from the past. You know, and it kind of has this sort of like, a lot of it's very pagan actually, if you listen to them. And so I thought the Hierophant would be good because I feel like they're very old school. They're drawing on stuff from the past. A lot of people look to them for inspiration. So Led Zeppelin for the Hierophant. Now for the Lovers. For the Lovers, I decided to go with Whitesnake. Why Whitesnake? Well, if you've ever seen a Whitesnake video, at least the ones from the 80s, they featured Tawny Kitaen, the beautiful Tawny Kitaen, who's passed away now, but with her lovely red hair. And it was, you know, very seen as very sexy. And, you know, it was sort of, she was like the quintessential like video vixen, right? And all about like the singer's relationship, you know, with that particular woman. And really, I guess you could say there's lots of video vixens, but I definitely think that she's like the queen of them. And so I would put the Lovers there. The Lovers all about like the couple and love and romance. And so we definitely put it there. And if you listen to like a lot of their songs, it is very much about like love and romance. So I have to put Whitesnake as the Lovers. All right, The Chariot. So for The Chariot, I picked Judas Priest. Now, Judas Priest, one of my favorite bands. The Chariot, right away, I think about Rob Halford riding in on his motorbike. I don't know if he does, I don't think he does that anymore, but when he was younger, he did that a lot, where for the shows, he'd ride in on his motorbike. But if you listen to Judas Priest is like a very positive band. They're very empowering. Like you always feel like, yes, I can take on the world when you listen to Judas Priest, right? So Judas Priest very much about empowerment. It's about taking action. It's about courage. So I think of Judas Priest like that determination. It's very energized. Love listening to them. Actually, their latest album is really good. Go listen to Invincible Shield. Really great album. But anyway, Judas Priest, I would put as a Chariot. All right. So Strength. So for Strength, I have picked Iron Maiden. We have here, well, we do have a maiden here with a beast. And if you think of like the number of the beast, you think of Eddie, the iconic, Eddie, who's like their mascot, the monster there. I just feel like that is like perfect. Iron Maiden is kind of like, this, we've got the beast here, right? We've got the monster here. But Iron Maiden, they draw again a lot of things from like history and religion and mythology in their work. But a lot of their stuff is about integrity and courage and doing the right thing. And, you think about that. Those are all qualities, in the Strength card, about that sort of that integrity and that bravery. And, I think that they're perfect for the Strength card. All right, the Hermit one may be an odd choice, but hear me out on it. Okay, so for the Hermit, I actually picked Guns N' Roses. And you might be like, well, that's weird. But, the Hermit's about following your own light and not worrying about what other people are doing. And, if you think of Guns N' Roses, you think about like how Appetite came out, and it was very different from some of the albums that had come before, especially out of that LA scene, because it was a lot more gritty. It was a lot more real. They weren't glamorizing things, and they were really speaking their truth about the life that they were living. And then if you look at the Use Your Illusion albums, it was a departure where they started doing things a little bit differently. Axl had, his trilogy of like, what was it? Don't Cry, November Rain, and Strange, and doing things kind of his own way. And then when they fell apart, like he actually did become like a hermit for a while, where he wouldn't go out in public and, wouldn't do interviews and things. And then now they're kind of back together and doing their thing, right? Which is great for fans like me. But I thought that would be a good thing for the Hermit. It's like shining your own light, not worrying about what like the rest of the crowd is doing, whatever everyone else is doing, and just kind of doing your own thing. So I picked them for the Hermit. All right, the Wheel of Fortune. So for the Wheel of Fortune, I picked AC/DC. So Wheel of Fortune, fortune goes up and it goes down, and they've certainly been through a lot of things. The first singer there actually wasn't actually the original singer, but anyway, for our purposes, we'll say Bon Scott, the singer that was before Brian Johnson. He died, and then it was like, is this going to be the end of AC/DC? But it wasn't. They got Brian Johnson, and then the wheel turned on them again, and they were up in the charts again and doing really well. Back in Black, great album. But, it's like the slings of fate and just going with it and going with, sort of what fortune gives you. I think too, if you think about the center of the wheel here, AC/DC has remained AC/DC from the 70s on till now. They haven't, changed their style. They didn't go grunge in the 90s. They didn't poof out their hair in the 80s. They didn't go new metal in the early 2000s. They just kept being AC/DC. They stayed at kind of the center of the wheel while everything else was changing around them, and remained who they are. And now, they've also like had some things happen where like Malcolm Young is now gone, and the singer Brian Johnson's had some hearing issues. But again, they keep going forward. They keep preserving. They keep going forward with things. So that's why I picked them for the Wheel of Fortune. All right, Justice. This one was an easy one. I had to pick Metallica for this. And Justice for All, that album, I had to pick, for sure. But if you look at the themes in a lot of Metallica's songs, they are very much about justice. They are about things that are unfair. There are things about, injustice in the world. Especially, I think a lot of their earlier stuff, if you listen to the first, I would say 5 albums, you have a lot of those themes. And so justice is something that comes up over and over again as a theme in Metallica music. So that's why I picked Justice for Metallica. All right. So next we have the Hanged Man. This one I had to kind of think about for a little while. And so I decided to go with Rage Against the Machine. So the Hanged Man, is about looking at things from a different point of view. It's about wisdom. It's about seeing things a little bit differently. And it's also about sacrificing things, right? And so if we think about bands like Rage Against the Machine, and especially like Tom Morello, he doesn't worry about what's popular as far as people's political opinions. Like, he's always been very political. He's actually I believe he has a political science major from Harvard. But, it's about looking at things, like, it's not just about, like some bands, it's all about partying and sex and whatever. And this is very much like they're very political. And it was actually funny during the pandemic. Tom Morello would tweet, some political opinions, and people would be like, when did you get so political? And it's like, well, have you listened to any of the music? I always find that really weird when people listen to a band, but they don't actually like think about the lyrics, and Rage Against the Machine is very political, like if you listen to them. And so I picked them for the Hangman because they are looking at things from a different point of view. They come from, they came from a bit of a different background, I think, than most other metal bands. And so they were looking at things from a different point of view. And it really kind of kicked off in some ways that whole new metal genre. I'm not a fan of new metal, by the way. I'll talk about that another time. Why I don't think it's really metal. But Rage Against the Machine, I will make an exception for. I do like them. But they took sort of some of those rap elements and put it into the music and created something that was like a little bit different and looking at the world from a different point of view. And so that's why I picked them for the Hangman. All right, Death. So for Death, I had to pick Alice Cooper. I mean, Alice Cooper's imagery is like so over the top. Halloween, you have to pick him. Like, you think about like the makeup and the snakes and the show. If you've ever seen an Alice Cooper show, it's pretty amazing. It's not, don't worry. Like, I don't like gore, but I still love an Alice Cooper short. It's very cartoony. It's very Hammer horror type show. And so I had to pick him for the Death card because, he gets like his head cut off in the show. There's lots of like images of like horror type stuff in his shows. And so I had to pick that for the Death card, sort of like confronting that mortality, confronting our fears about mortality. And, he's been around forever as well. And he's still going strong. He's still out there touring. So way to go, Alice Cooper. All right. For Temperance, I picked Def Leppard. You might be like, why Def Leppard? But Temperance is really about finding a balance between things and mixing two things that may not seem to go together, but they actually do. And if you think about Def Leppard, not so much the early stuff, but if you think of things like their big album Hysteria, it was really combining pop and elements of hard rock together to create something that appealed to an awful lot of people, right? And finds like a really good balance. I also find too, generally Def Leppard music tends to be, it's pretty positive music. It doesn't really wander into a lot of dark themes, but I think they do a really good balancing sort of that popular kind of music with sort of more hard rock elements. My favorite album is Pyromania, where they were starting to kind of do that, but I think they really got into that when Hysteria came out, their big album. All right, The Devil. Who am I going to pick for The Devil? Well, I picked Motley Crue. So the devil, if you think of the devil's about all the vices in the world. You think about like addictions. You think about like over the top, sex and stuff. You think about, violence and things like that. And Motley Crue really, like if you read about some of the stuff that's happened to them and some of the stuff that they've got into, holy crow, it is amazing that any of them are alive. Never mind, all four of them are alive. And, really they're like a cautionary tale about like the, how addictions can kind of like ruin your life, They've almost died. I think Nikki Sixx has died technically twice and been brought back. Vince Neil accidentally killed a guy in a car accident. One of his friends actually. And that was again because of like drugs and alcohol. And you think about like, they're kind of like a cautionary tale of all the things that can go wrong. And like I said, surprisingly still alive, still here, gotten sober, a lot of them, I hope anyway, and doing better. But it shows that, I picked them for the devil because of that. All right, the Tower card. Now the Tower card, I had to pick this, even though this is not a band I actually like. I had to pick Nirvana. And the reason for that is because grunge really did change things almost it wasn't quite overnight. It happened over time, but it's definitely seems in hindsight like overnight that we have Nirvana really changed things, and the grunge theme really changed things, because in the 80s it was like, especially in the mid to the late 80s, hair metal was king. That was like the main genre of metal. And then you had like grunge come along, and it really changed things. Like people started to gravitate towards that because it was different. You didn't have, no longer was it like you got to be pretty. Now it was like you got to look as sloppy as you can. Also, like I found like grunge plays really sloppy, generally speaking, as opposed to like being like a guitar, aficionado, where you're playing your guitar in very like clean technical ways. That went to this more like sloppy, earthy kind of way. And it really did change things almost overnight. Some of these bands that were super popular were playing like arenas and stadiums suddenly couldn't fill clubs anymore because of this. And record executives like pulled money out of these bands and put them into like this new thing. And so it was like a big shakeup. It really did change things. It really did like kind of rip the carpet out underneath, from some of these bands. And so I had to pick that for the Tower. Now for the star is about hope and optimism, and so I picked Twisted Sister. Twisted Sister, if you ever seen a Twisted Sister video, they're funny, for the most part. A lot of them are quite humorous, they're quite silly, they don't take themselves overly seriously. They've got the big hair and the crazy makeup and crazy costumes. And to me, like the star is about hopefulness and optimism. And I always find like Twisted Sister is very hopeful and optimistic and funny. I remember as a kid, like parents being upset about Twisted Sister, but as kids, we didn't understand it because we're like, the video is obviously funny. Like, it's just funny. It's like a living cartoon. Like, why are people upset about this? So, and then I think about like Dee Snider, the lead singer of Twisted Sister. He's kind of a bit of a Gen X hero because he did testify before Congress when there were hearings about should they put, restrictions on music or lyrics in the in the packaging of music, because they were worried that it was ruining kids. And he was just like so smart and so well spoken and really like kind of stood up for the industry and free speech and all that stuff. So he's a big hero for that. And if you follow him on Twitter, he's not afraid to speak his mind about things. So I picked the star for Twisted Sister for the star, pardon me. The moon, I had to go with Ozzy. I mean, Bark of the Moon, right? Had to go with Ozzy. You think about Ozzy has a lot of themes in his songs about madness. And you think of the moon, and that can be definitely one of the themes in that particular card. But you'll see it in stuff like Bark of the Moon, Diary of a Madman. Actually, all throughout his work, there are a lot of themes of things like mortality, and madness and addiction and things like that. And so I think that is actually like very appropriate for the moon card, which can signify all of those things. And so that's why I picked the moon, Ozzy for the moon. The sun card, I decided to pick Van Halen for the sun card. The sun is optimism and joy and just, expressing yourself in the world. And when I think of Van Halen, whether it's the David Lee Roth Van Halen or the Sammy Hagar Van Halen, I think of like a blonde showman walking around, taking up the spotlight. That's definitely Van Halen. Plus, very talented band, obviously. But the sun is joyful and hopeful. And if you think of Van Halen music, it's fun music. It's fun summertime music to listen to with great guitar riffs. You can't go wrong with listening to them for sure. And so I've got the sun here for Van Halen. All right. So the Judgment card. So for Judgment, I picked Megadeth. I had to, I just think like, they just fit this so much. Judgment, listening to the call of your heart. If you know the story of how Megadeth was formed, Dave Mustaine originally was in Metallica. They got signed to their first record deal and they fired him. They went all the way out to New York. They're from San Francisco, went all the way out to New York. Mind you, Dave Mustaine's behavior is what led him to be fired, but he was fired. And then on the bus back, he was put on the bus back to San Francisco. On the bus, he decided that he was going to make a band, that he was like, it's going to be more famous than Metallica. And he spent his whole life doing that. But he answered the call. He listened to the call within him. And if you listen to Megadeth, there's a lot of religious imagery in their stuff. There's a lot of stuff against themes, much like with Metallica, about justice, but also like judgment and madness and things. And so it's very much about, like, to me, he answered the call, like, hey, I'm going to make my own heavy metal band, right? He listened to that, he answered to that. And, there are a lot of themes about judgment and things in Megadeth music. And then the world. For the world, I picked Kiss. Kiss has been around forever. Again, they're from the 70s and they're still doing it now. Although, how many like farewell tours have they had? I went to a farewell tour in 1997, I have to say, which was the four members, and they did have the makeup, and it was a really great show. But I think about Kiss because Kiss has been around. They're an institution. They've been around for a long time. They are a little worldly in that they are like the masters of like marketing. Like, they'll put their name on like freaking anything, right? But Kiss has been around for a long time, and they're even talking about like having avatars, so even when they're dead, they can continue on. Like, they'll just like never go away, And they're kind of, a little bit of cartoon figures for sure, especially with that makeup and everything. So you think about like the four symbols here. I think about like the four faces, with Kiss, right? And so you think about Kiss, they have like changed. I mean, they had the makeup, and then the 80s they stopped doing the makeup, and they were like more like glam metal, and they went 90s and they brought the makeup back, and they've kind of cycled around several times and been through different sort of incarnations. But the four sort of like iconic faces remain, and so that's why I picked them for the world. So that is my heavy metal arcana. What are yours? Who would you pick? Are you like, oh my God, I would not pick that. I would pick this band for this. Why didn't you include this band? I mean, there were a lot of bands I thought about including, but you can't include them all. There's only like 22, right? Major arcana. But let me know what your thoughts are about this, who you would pick. And also, I invite you, if you want to do this too, go ahead. Or if you want to do a different genre of music, maybe you're into pop or country or rap, and you want to pick who you would pick for the major arcana, I think that would be really, really cool. And I'd love to see it. Let me know if you do that. Again, thank you to all of my patrons. You guys are awesome. You keep this channel going, so thank you. And thank you to all of you who watch this. Thank you for following me. I really appreciate all of the support. I'm going to be putting out, I think, a video next week about, I'm turning 50 this week. Actually, I'm probably going to post this. I might post this. My birthday's on the 15th, so I'm not sure if I'm going to post this before or after. But yeah, I can't believe I'm that old. That's pretty crazy. But anyway, yes, I thought I would do this as a fun thing to do, to post. Maybe I'll post this on my birthday, because that would be kind of fun. But anyway, thank you all of you for watching and for supporting me. And if you want to check my Patreon, of course, no pressure, go ahead if you're interested in that. And if you want to get an Etsy reading for me, I'm doing a sale all this month in honor of my birthday. You want to check that out, that's cool too. But otherwise, just thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me for a little while. I really appreciate it. And as always, peace and love.